All right, I'm starting the recording, so we'll go ahead and get started. And if I see anybody come in, we will graciously let them in. I'm so super excited to celebrate with you once again, Caridad. My name is Malika Albrecht, and I am the founding editor of Redheaded Stepchild. And we are starting back our Thursdays with a real big party today, because now not only do we get to see you a second time, we get to celebrate birth of your book, Tortillera. Is that
Tortillera? Like tortilla, but tortillera.
Tortillera.
Yes.
And I am so super excited. We've been talking about, some of your book launches and how amazing that's been, but I like that we kind of have a small group so that we can have a lot of discussion. And I love that you're so open about talking about what inspired a poem, a particular poem. So I am going to briefly read a bio, and then I'm going to turn it over to you. And anybody that wants to write a question in there so you don't forget it, put it in the chat section. And so this was the winner of the TRP Southern Poetry Breakthrough Prize for Florida, and Visionware was published by Finishing Line Press 2009. And Caridad was one of the contributing editors for Grabbed, which if you missed that book launch here, please go to the YouTube channel and see it, because that was just such a powerful evening of poetry. She's also the associate editor of SWWIM Every, an online daily poetry journal, recipient of the Elizabeth George Foundation grant and a Florida Individual Artists Fellowship in Poetry. Her work has been nominated for Pushcart Prizes, the Best of the Net, and Lambda Literary Award. Recent work can be found at the Best American Poetry blog, Rhino, I love Rhino, Go Magazine, Fantastical Florida, Notre Dame Review, and others. She resides in Miami, Florida with her wife and son. Welcome, Caridad. We're so glad to have you here.
Thank you so much.
Being our first May.
It's so great to be here, and thank you to be back after your little break that I'm glad you took. Because we have kind of like an intimate audience, do you think that I could share my screen? Because I want to talk a little bit about the title of the book.
Yes, I would.
And I would love to show you the structure of this particular poem, because they kind of go hand in hand. And first, thank you for having me. Thank you for being here. Those of you who are here, thank you for those who are going to tune in later on the recording. I'm just thrilled to be a part of this wonderful reading series. So Tortillera borrows its title from a derogatory term for lesbian in, for me, the Cuban culture, but it's also known throughout South America, Central America, and Europe. It is like subdike, the worst thing you could say. For example, I've heard, better my daughter be a whore than a tortillera, that sort of thing. So I decided that, and language has such a big influence on us, right? The words that we internalize and equate as bad, that we don't want to be. So I didn't come out until later in life, and partly it was because I think of the effects of that word, the effects of the idea of what I would be seen as if I were to come out and live my life as a lesbian. So I had to claim the term, own it, so that I can disarm it and reframe it. And I'm here to say that I'm not ashamed of it anymore. I actually have a t-shirt that says tortillera, so it's kind of cool. Yeah. So I'm going to share the screen. So what I did was I borrowed from the OED, which is, the preeminent English language dictionary. So I kind of wanted to screw with them a little bit and borrow their form to discuss Spanish words and their implications. So from the get, I'm kind of like playing with traditional modes of language to explore this particular term. And entry, of course, because it's meant to be like a dictionary entry, and also the entry into the book in order to frame the context of the title. So entry, tortillera, noun, pronunciation, Spanish, tortillera, Spain, Latin, Central, and South America. US. Forms: torti, torta, tort, tortillera, tortilla. Etymology: from the Latin for tortoise, twisted. From the Spanish, torta. From the German, queue. From the English, queer. Compare French tortiller. From term torticera, tortuous, derived from Latin tortuous, with meaning of crooked, twisted, etc. Torticera, a highbrow word, by a process of popular etymology, pronounced wrongly as tortillera by their phonetic similarity, as in she is tortillera instead of she is torticera by an error of pronunciation. Synonyms: amaricada, arepera, boyera, bollo, buchona, cachapera, gambuja, camionera, comecoños, desviada, entendida, fricatriz, hombruna, invertida, juega tenis, kiki, lechuga, lela, lencha, lesbiana, machorra, marimacha, obvia, sáfica, sopapilla, tijeras, tribada, trola, troquera, virago, huevilla, zapatona. There's a whole abecedarian of terms there, ladies. 1, homosexual woman, lesbian. I outed myself as a tortillera at Nochebuena dinner last Christmas, and I was roasted along with the lechon. B, transatlantic traveler term known to connect homosexuality with the beginning of homophobia, refutes all sexual and onomatopoeic explanations, i.e. the supposed equivalency between the clapping sound made from kneading corn pancakes to the sound made during lesbian sex. As seen through the consideration of homosexual behavior as something twisted, deviant, first referenced in 1830 in the Spanish-French dictionary by M. Núñez de Taboada, published in Madrid, in which the French word tribade is translated as tortillera and defined as a woman who abuses another. My mother did not allow me to play softball in high school because the coach was a tortillera and she didn't want me to end up a tortillera too. C, derogatory slang that denotes deviant, twisted behavior, the lowest form of female debasement, term known to induce emotional distress, such as shame and self-loathing, as well as physical symptoms, including, but not limited to, anorexia, bulimia, cutting, dermatitis, depression, unuresis, flushing, gastritis, heart palpitations, hyperhidrosis, insomnia, irritable bowel syndrome, kyphosis, lethargy, malaise, mania, nausea, nightmares, OCD, panic attack, paranoia, rash, rosacea, scarring, sleepwalking, stuttering, tachycardia, tongue biting, teeth gnashing, thinning hair, ulcers, vomiting, xerostomia. Better my daughter be dead than a disgusting tortillera. 2, female producer and seller of maize pancakes. According to Adolfo Sanchez Vasquez, upon the arrival of Spaniards exiled to Mexico due to the Civil War, some were greeted by a sign that read, El Sindicato de Tortilleras les da bienvenida, which caused someone to quip, this is a very cosmopolitan country, if even tortilleras have a union. So that's what tortillera means. Once that was the last poem that I wrote in the collection. And that's when I knew it was done, because I had worried about that, about the title. You know, is it going to be misconstrued? Is somebody going to think I'm co-opting the experience of a tortillera for real, someone who's making tortillas? So I found it really necessary, and then everything else opened up for me. Okay, so I'm going to read actually the poem that I wrote from the eksphrastic poetry workshop that I took. I stumbled across an installation that was a suitcase, and in it there was a little TV, and it was playing West Side Story, which I grew up loving. Excuse me. it had a little tape recording of a song by Brenda Feliciano, a song that I grew up listening to and playing on the guitar. And it also had lines from Pedro Pietri, the Nuyorican Cafe founder. And he spoke a lot about the working man, and that also spoke to me and my upbringing. So this is what came from that. Unpacking the suitcase. After West Side Story, Upside Down, Backwards, Sideways, and Out of Focus by Adal. 1. Snippets of West Side Story, Los Angeles, California, 1974. This is how you learn you are not an all-American girl. Once a year, you watch West Side Story on the screen of your parents' 1974 Zenith and catch a glimpse of yourself on television. You are the firstborn gringa in the family. Your English is perfect, but you're not like your friends. You don't go to slumber parties or play dates. You don't join the brownies or take ballet. But once a year, you get to live in Technicolor and root for the Sharks because they speak Spanish too. You're taught there is safety in numbers. You move in packs, sibling cloistered in an apartment building, just like Maria's, cousins and tias on every floor, duenas en patas de casa, adept at concealing battalions of Playtex cross your heart bras, black lace slips that slide off the shoulder, the delicate mauve of a fading bruise. During the mambo scene, your mother dances around your living room, tells you to watch her, shows you how to control the hula hoop of your skirt so that the crinolines she has pinned to your PJs orbit around your hips, ruffled panties of flash and blur, makes you promise not to tell your father what you've learned. Like Anita, your mother knows her way around a bolt of cloth, but you say nothing of how she sews the clothes you wear, how after work she comes home to your dresses, red cushion pushpin corsage at her wrist, alchemy of thread and simplicity patterns, spun into gold standard replicas, fit for the girl you want to be, but aren't. 2. Sound bites. En mi viejo San Juan, as sung by Brenda Feliciano. My father makes me learn to play En mi viejo San Juan on the guitar, makes me earn the lessons he pays for, makes me croon the words on command so I can perfect the version he prefers. Brenda Feliciano, her warble of loss, the third language we speak at home. It doesn't matter that my father is from Havana or that he's never seen San Juan. What matters is how he weeps when I begin to sing, a keen that careens into a wail I replicate but cannot understand. I am 13 and have never lost anything except his approval. I am 13 and want nothing more than to escape the ache in his house, escape to where I will long for nothing, especially his love. 3. What I told Pedro Pietri about my father at the Nuyorican Cafe. He was never late. He didn't have a car. He worked. He walked to work. He was always on time. He was on time the day the wheel spinner took his finger. He was on time the morning the foreman was late. He was on time the morning the foreman forgot to check his machine. He heard his finger jam the machine before he saw it severed. He saw his finger spinning in the wheel before he felt the pain of its loss. He joked that the wheel spinner ate his finger before he ate his breakfast. He joked that he should have called in sick. He joked because he had no sick days. He apologized for breaking the machine. He apologized for his blood, how it tie-dyed the wheel. He apologized after he fainted. He apologized for the mess his mangled hand left on the floor. He apologized to Hector, who was sent to clean up the mess. He was 21. The wheel spinner was older than he was. The foreman said it was an accident. The foreman said the company was not at fault. The company offered him $1,500. He thought $1,500 was a fortune. The foreman told him $1,500 was more than the going rate for a single finger. He thought $1,500 was more than he deserved. He said he did not say the foreman was usually late. He did not say the foreman was usually hungover. He did not say the foreman had to rig the machine every morning. He said it was an accident. He said the foreman was not at fault. He said the company was not at fault. He signed the no-fault agreement. He signed it with his left hand. He signed the check with his left hand. He walked home with $1,500 bills in his pocket. He thought he bought a solid gold ID bracelet branded with his name to remind him of who he was. He went back to work as soon as they let him. He was never late. Thank you. That's for my dad's missing finger. So I'm going to change it up a little bit. This book is also a love story. Love story, the speaker coming into herself. A love story of integrity, but also the truth behind love stories, that they don't always work. So it's not happily ever after, but there is a lot of love poetry here. But the love poems are also political, and aren't they all? So this is kind of a pre-love story, but I'm going to read it. What the white girl asked at our 20th high school reunion. Why weren't we friends in school? We weren't friends because I knew you hung out in the American parking lot, unlike my boyfriend who parked his Stingray in the Cuban one on the other side of school. Of course, I hung out there. Not that you would understand why being his girl meant I could not sit in your car and listen to your Def Leppard, your motley crew. Leave him to fend for himself. We weren't friends because he courted me old school, couched beside my father every Sunday while I served apprentice to my mother, her eyes onion stung, arms spattered with marrow and lard, who worked at loving her place at the stove. Rules I had not learned how to break yet. We weren't friends because I envied the way you weren't allowed to settle, how you were encouraged to date assorted breeds of boys who strutted across the lawn to ring your bell. Your dad waved his blessing out the door and didn't worry because he taught you to discern, to choose among them, taught you to drive yourself, headlights set on more than the slam of the same car door, even if it was a Corvette. You guys are awesome. So let's see. So, okay, another vocabulary poem, if you will. In Spanish, there is no word for girlfriend. The word that you use is novia, which is really translated into bride. So the idea of like just a girlfriend, So this is a take on that. Cuban American lexicon. In Espanol, the word for girlfriend does not exist. Instead, I was his novia, intended, fiance, bride, in training. I was neither girl nor friend to the boy I chose. Duty down the aisle, toward the altar where novia turned into spouse, consort, wife, esposa, in Espanol, known also to mean shackle, manacle, handcuff. True story. So I Thank you. I don't think that, how much time do I have?
I'm good with us just to keep it loose and you know, keep going. And then if you want to open up to questions or tell us behind the scenes, but I'm having a blast and I have a few questions. So
Okay, so let's do that. Let's talk a little bit about the questions and
one of my burning questions is this: hearing you read, I was thinking you must edit out loud. Like you must read it or say it out loud and then do your editing, because I was listening to your, you know, your slant rhymes and interior rhymes. I was like, holy cow, this is just amazing. Like I wrote down some of them. I was trying to keep up. And then also, so I was thinking, do you do syllabic counts? Because I just started to believe you did. And then I also had curiosity about the fact that your work has texture and tactile experiences like none other that I can remember hearing recently, but I had a lot of tactile and that was fascinating to me. So I have questions.
um first, thank you. And you may not, I could give you like, you know, the academic, we were talking about the academic professor answer and tell you, of course I do. I don't even read them out loud.
Oh my gosh, how is that
I
possible?
hear
No.
them in my head.
Okay, okay.
I'm also a musician.
That's what I was going to
So,
ask you next.
so a lot of the times I just
I
hear it and I never count syllables unless I am specifically writing in form.
That's awesome.
And it's interesting that you say that because I did a project with O Miami where people were sending in information for people who had died during COVID, and we were writing memorial poems for people we had never met. And of course, the first request I get, they're like, "Hey, can you write us a poem in Spanish?"
Oh,
And you know, my Spanish is Spanglish. I'm not formally educated in it. It's not my jam at all.
yeah.
And especially poetry in Spanish to me is very rhymed. There's a very, you know, purposeful kind of melody in my head. So of course I decided to write a sonnet, which I never write. So I'm gonna write a sonnet in Spanish.
Holy
And
cow.
you know, because that's who I am. And but it ended up working because the music I was hearing in Spanish needed the rhyme and
Okay.
needed the container,
Yeah.
right? It needed the structure. So so yes and no, I do hear it, but I don't speak it aloud until it's done. And then I typically will read it out loud to my wife because she's my
Yeah.
first reader.
Okay.
And then I'll hear it. And then I'll be like, oh, okay, no. But
Yeah,
mostly it's just, it's like a song. But that's how I do grammar too. For a long time, I didn't know why it was that way. I just knew that that was correct because of the way that it sounded.
yeah. So I was going to
So,
say, I think it's just your way of processing, and it doesn't surprise me that you're a musician. But it's something that just blows my mind that you just hear it. And I think that's just the experience that you have. And it shocks me because I'm like, that's just so, what a, you know, what a great gift though. What a great gift,
thank you.
because I was thinking about how lovely it is to hear just the sound. Like if we weren't looking for meaning, if I was just listening to the sounds, it's lovely. It's
Thank you.
beautiful.
Thank you. And as for the tactile elements,
Yes.
you know, the other day I was speaking to a friend, and I think I might pursue this idea in an essay that I don't know if I am a poet because I view the world in metaphor, or if I view the world in metaphor because I'm a poet.
No, that makes sense. It
Because
does.
really, you know, and I know it's kind of chicken or the egg, but there is a slight difference.
Yeah.
And I think I see a metaphor in everything. So including a blanket, because it's not just a blanket, you know, and it like, and that goes back to when I first had my son. There is a reflex, and it's actually called the Moro reflex. And the
Yeah.
way I
I
spell
was
my
gonna say
name,
that's your last name.
yeah, and that's a poem that is in the works, but that's a whole family tragedy poem waiting to happen. But it's the instinct that even if you put a blanket on a baby's head, they'll push it away.
Yeah.
They're base, they don't even know they're alive even, but they know
Yeah.
to do that. And that struck me as both wonderful and, you know, a metaphor for the human spirit, but also terribly, terribly awful because of just how vulnerable they are, that they
Yeah.
would literally, you know, they
have to have a
cannot fight.
reflex like that.
They
Have
have
to
the reflex, but they cannot fight. They cannot back it
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
biology, right? So that
Yeah.
blanket became, when my son, you know, had put it over his head and was doing that, that became this metaphor. And that was my first memory of like something that I was holding, because I really started writing after he was born.
Yeah.
Something about, I think, birthing him kind of birthed this creative, and I didn't want to go down as just his mom. Like I wanted him to be proud. So I started to reach my own levels, so that, and that's actually a perfect segue to my next poem.
I was just going to say, that's just a beautiful behind the scenes story though. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. So I'm going to read two of them that I don't really usually read, and they're about, you know, mamas.
Yeah.
And it's difficult, and we don't get a lot of empathy and compassion, especially in those early days that are so hard. So what they don't tell you at the baby shower: you will be insane far longer than you were pregnant. Lunatic with hormones, stretch marked, skin a field of brambled scarlet. You will leak, stain every piece of clothing you wear, soft cloth now, nipples cracked and bleeding, sustenance leached away by the whine and pull of the breast pump. You will know you never knew what it was to be exhausted, bones etched with fatigue, fugue of feedings that fall into short-reeled eye blinks, Beaujolais and cigarettes, joy, until you jolt awake. Remember, you forgot the baby as you dreamed. You will keep from shaking your child who just won't stop crying. You will cower in the closet, aglow in cell phone light, crisis hotline on the other side. You will grow afraid of speeding cars and spinning spokes, of skid marks and sirens, of camp counselors and men's rooms, of triple dog dares and high dives, of high fives, laughter that lodges a jawbreaker in the throat. You will long for an empty nest, a white couch, a full glass of water, access to the remote control, only to get it, and wish you could return to the mosaic of days you scrapbooked away. Thank you. And then this is probably one of the first poems I ever wrote. Seriously, right? Waiting to be discharged from the maternity ward. Consider the eyes of a boy who has the heart to cram a black cat firecracker down the throat of a gecko. Consider his hands, the giddy rush as he tries and tries to light the match that will ice his blood. Consider his laughter, the sound of explosion, the slivers of lizard that land in his hair. Consider my son, hours old, bruised from the battle of breaking away from me, as I consider how to keep him from stealing my lighter, from sneaking out back, my love in his pocket, M80 in his hands. That baby's 18 now.
Oh, that is so amazing. And I'm trying to think of what a fabulous gift like all of this is for him, you know, in the experience. And you're right. I love hearing about motherhood and in those early days, those early months, and just all that we carry. And, you know, I think that there's something very important about saying the truth about that experience and speaking it into, you know, I was thinking about what you said, there's no word for girlfriend. It matters about that. Like, you know, what we call things, like naming is so important, but also like having that story out there is important.
Right. And when that was first published, the editor said, you know, I really like this, but I'm not sure. And she thought I was referring to somebody who was a victim because of the whole handcuff. And we literally had to have a conversation about it. And she said, don't change anything. I understand now. And if people who read it don't understand, these are the kind of conversations that will come from this poem, and those are necessary.
Yes. Yes. But I just love him, my love in the pocket and M80 in the other hand, just like yes, yes, and bruised from the battle of breaking away from me. Yes, Laura, that
And
was.
like, he's gonna grab my lighter because it's not like I didn't do any of those things. But when you have a child, you want to like, divorce them from all your bad things. Like, he's been gone all day, and this morning he laughed at me. He said, "Did you really say this to me?" I said, "Okay, have fun, make good choices, make good choices."
Good choices.
He was like,
Oh, come on. And my prayer
Come
was
on,
always,
Mom.
please let it skip a generation. Please skip a generation. So I'll have really naughty
and largely
grandkids.
it has. He's not the type of boy to put a firecracker in the mouth of a gecko. So at least I got that. I manifested that one. I manifested
Come
that
on.
one.
I look at my daughters and I think I am so lucky. This is way more than I deserve. But again,
poor
and then
kid,
also,
it's not easy having a poet mama, right? It's fun. But I told him, I keep all my journals and all my stuff, and when I'm dead, go ahead. I don't care. I'm dead. Publish it all. Make a lot of money.
yeah, well, but also there's so much to be said about that life well lived, but not just well lived, well observed, well written,
And honest. Like, I don't understand people who whitewash their experiences to their kids because one, it's not true. Two, nobody's that perfect. And three, when the kid makes a mistake, it makes them feel even worse, right?
Exactly. The lack of like transparency and humility and humanness, approachability, I think is so problematic. And the more I can say I relate, or this is what my experience was, maybe yours will be different, but just to give you like insight into how many times I hit my head on my bad decisions is helpful, I think.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
okay, I'm going to read a couple more.
Yes.
Unless we're done, because I don't want to take up any time.
No, please keep going. Please keep going. I'm loving how that you're just like allowing conversation and then going back in.
Oh yeah, I love to do that.
That's awesome.
Because again, right? I would love to have had these conversations with Rita Dove, sit down and be like, so, let's talk about that. And some of the best readings I've ever been to are reading craft talk readings at the same time. And typically if you come to these poetry readings, you are interested in that. So I think that it's a lovely model to try and emulate when I've seen it done by others. Julie Marie Wade is someone who's very good about that. She's very gracious and talks a lot about it. So I try to model after that.
It's helpful to hear like what was the first poem that kind of sparked, you with writing this whole book. So for me, I love hearing your process. It's so much different than I expected, but I love it. It makes me happy.
Yeah, I'm not at all a formalist. I'm a narrative girl. And I think that comes from it too, that I think maybe I was a bard in another life. The idea that, you have to give a story. So we all have our poetic mentors. And of course, one of mine is William Carlos Williams. Yeah. So I was trying to write an anti-love poem. And I kind of rewrote one of his famous ones. So I don't attribute it because I don't have to. Everybody will know. But I did want to honor him before I read it. And it's called I Don't Eat Plums Anymore. I love you guys. This is like, it's lively because, if we were in person, this is what will be happening. And sometimes these readings are very sterile and, you just, but so I don't eat plums anymore. I could call you, but either way, there'd be too much to break to fix the ache that is your name. A good day is measured in minutes. I have not thought of you. All this to say, the tree we planted has borne fruit, but I misplaced the recipe for plum preserves you left behind. I have forgotten. You were so cold, not ever as sweet.
Shut the door. This is not mine. Total fangirl.
That was clever.
Oh my God. I'm sorry. I need to remake myself. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Karen, that was beautiful.
Thank you.
Shut the
Thank
door.
you so much.
Oh my gosh.
That's fabulous.
Yeah, those anti-love poems are awesome sometimes.
That was juicy. That was super juicy.
Yeah, it is. And the person who it's for will know who it's for.
Even better.
Oh, the little ways that we have to get back, right? Okay, so
It's
girls, you're getting all
multi-purpose.
the tea today. You're getting all the tea. So, okay, I feel like two more. Like I'm reading stuff I can never read, so it's kind of nice. So this is uncoupled, and in terms of like playing with the form, it's all in couplets. Well, not couplets, but 2-line stanzas, and except for the last line, and you'll know by then. Uncoupled. The morning she flung the earrings she gave me out the door and onto the grass, I dropped to my knees and tried to recover diamonds from a patch of earth battened down by dirt and rain. When I found one post and back intact, I saw it as a sign. We too could be saved. We too could regain what we both had discarded. She watched me there, stooped from the search, denim knees besotted with mud, stains I never did get out. And we both know what remains. One widowed earring waiting to be repurposed into pendant, stick pin, brooch. But what I can't recall is why I stopped the search before I found what was lost, why I decided I'd had enough, or why she didn't search too. And I'm gonna end with the last poem in the book, which is a love song to my wife, Elizabeth, who has the most beautiful handwriting I've ever seen. Solving the crossword for Elizabeth. We are new to one another, new to being us, yet old enough to know it always starts like this. Delicious to the point of delirium. Still, we are more than that. And I'm surprised at all the ways we fit, even when we don't. Each difference a study in alchemy, in balance, and working through instead of out. On our first flight together, I remember those airplane rides before you, crosswords I attempted alone, each puzzle unsolved, abandoned to the next traveler. Now we work on solutions together. Mine are collective, break down words to fill the emptiness within rigid black boxes with the precise mark of your perfect graphite script. Thank y'all. You've been so nice.
That was fabulous. Y'all can unmute. We can all unmute it because I know people want to do what I'm doing. Oh, I love the.
Thanks so much.
Congratulations. That's awesome. That was fabulous. And you were thinking about like you see life, you were talking about seeing life as metaphors. And I thought, what a lovely metaphor of the working together on a crossword puzzle of solving things. That was just lovely while taking flight. That's awesome. And then I was listening once again to the fact, like you post and back intact, that whole poem had so much musicality. I was like, I can't believe you don't read that out loud. I mean, like there's not taping it and going back over. Oh, that's a beautiful. What instrument do you play?
I play the guitar and I sing.
There we go.
So it's the singing.
You have an ear.
Yeah, I do. I have a really good ear. And you know, I don't admit that because in every poetry workshop, what's the first thing they say? You have to read it out loud because the poem needs to be. And I do hear it.
You don't need to.
I hear it in my head.
It's in your head.
And if I stop the flow, like sometimes though, if something isn't, then I'll say it out loud then. But for the most part, I don't.
Wow.
Yeah, I think that's just it's a beautiful gift that you have. And it's nice to hear that that's your experience. It's fascinating to me because I don't have that ear. So that was it's just lovely. But I know other people have questions, so please feel free to jump in. We're very fortunate that we can have this kind of intimate conversation and that Caridad is, bringing us behind the scenes.
I'm enamored.
So jump in. And Karen, you're being so quiet. You were having such a hard time earlier.
I
Shut
know.
the door.
I had to keep shutting my mic off because I'm making so much noise. I mean, the cat has left.
Oh, it makes me happy.
I scared the cat out of the room. I'm just like, throw him off. Oh my God. Your poetry is so musical. It's just, and there's so much metaphor in there. So I'm interested in your process for, like, do you have a process? Do you sit down and go, oh, I would sure like to write about my relationship. What can I find as a metaphor? Or I'm just interested in, like, how are the poems coming out of you?
You know, it depends, because sometimes if, you want to write, but you're not really writing, and you kind of have to force yourself and bring yourself to the page. I will go to maybe something that's been bothering me, a relationship. And, we all have our go-tos, right? So, oh, let's think about my mom, or let's think about my relationship with my dad, or there's always like the emotional crossroads where there's always grist for the mill.
Right.
So, but mostly it's the other way around. I will see something, I will see a metaphor, and that will trigger a memory or a moment or an experience. And sometimes the poem is built around the metaphor.
Okay.
And so and then I start very prosaically, like almost telling the story of how that metaphor is functioning and whatever story I'm telling. And then I start to pare down. So like last year during the pandemic, and right in April, right? So it's really early. 2 baby birds fell out of the nest, and we had seen Mama Dove just there, and she would have moved, and when our dog was outside, and I thought, what's going on, this bird? And when I looked, the 2 babies were there, so we were able to repatriate them to the nest. So my son, who was a senior in high school and got his whole senior year obliterated, I kind of repatriated him in my nest for one last year. Mama got to keep him in the nest for a little while longer, and I saw that immediately. So that hasn't been written yet, because I also need a little distance. I'm not, a lot of people have been saying, oh, I've written, 27 poems during the pandemic. I've written no pandemic poems. I've written other poems, but I need to sit with it. I need a little distance so that I can go in and start to mine it, start to tear it apart. Because when I'm in it, and whether that's love or pain or sorrow, I jot things down. I may take voice notes, but I'm not actually there, because it takes a lot. It's like that distance we were talking about when I first got on here. Like, I was saying that now that I'm looking at my poem through the lens of like some academic talks that I've had, I divorced myself from the poet, and I'm looking at it analytically. And so there's that distance. So I think that I can't do it when I'm in it, because I need that distance or if not, it's just sappy, that is good too, because I've gotten stuff out of the sappy. I would never publish this stuff, just like this release, right? But
right.
So yeah, I never do this. This bag is all full of like scraps and things and papers and then now that this book is finished, I'm gonna start to go through that, because there's like 3 books there of different things. But interestingly enough, when you mentioned Grabbed has opened me up into like this warrior poet that wants to just go after the patriarchy, and like everything that I'm writing lately is in some sort of that lens. So yeah, I don't have any secrets to keep for anybody anymore.
And that's important work. I mean, I think that there's a deepening, like what it sounds like, that experience brought a deepening of your personal, authentic voice. A sense of I am going to speak my truth. That's amazing, which is great, because you created a platform that allowed so many to speak their truth. It would only be fitting that we get to hear yours.
Right. And I think that for the 4 of us, because when we were editing it, all of us contributed. So all of us were willing to be vulnerable as well, which I think really helped us with the trust that you needed with our authors to be able to
Yes.
share these, you know, very vulnerable stories. And I know I'm very much an empath. So the more I read, the more, in order to be able to connect, the more honest I was, you know, in myself, in my conversations, you know, individual conversations that I had with contributors, with our fellow editors. I mean, Nikki, Elisa, and I had a lunch that was really long and really boozy and really awesome. And we just shared a lot of our stories that some of them had never even seen the light of day before. So from the get, that whole process. And that is why I do this, right? Why we do this, to connect, to maybe bridge a distance.
Yes, that's what I was
Yesterday, my mother
bridges.
was telling me that she connected with my cousin over a series of books, a woman who writes historical fiction, and she's written like, you know, 57 of them. And she connected with my aunt, with my cousin, who's very introverted, who barely speaks. And that now my cousin will text her, Dia, I just finished this one. I'm going to read the next. And I said to her, that sentence is exactly why I write.
Yes.
Because it took two people who have no chemistry or connection, and it was able to bring them together.
Yeah.
And that, you know, Grabbed was just such an important example of that. And even like my own books, so many people contributed, connections I have made to the stories that ended up in this book. So, and not, you know, just past lovers, but that's
but what a great poem that was.
Yeah, that's
oh,
right.
Elizabeth said, so sorry to be late. I couldn't get children in bed. Well, you are in a community that says we get it, and
oh, we totally get it.
We should have Caridad read that original, the poem that you were reading about. You will be insane longer than you were pregnant. That was just such a.
I'm still insane. Yeah.
Yes. I mean,
the same.
I feel that. I feel like I look that way as I'm like, I catch a glimpse of myself. I'm like, oh my gosh.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
No, Elizabeth. Yes, you are beautiful. But I so get that. I remember I wrote on a scrap of paper after I'd been nursing my second daughter like all night. I had walked down the hallway and I forgot there was a mirror at the end of the hallway, and I saw somebody which I did not recognize as myself, and I wrote down, what a weird stranger at the end of the hall. And then the next day I was like, oh my God, that was myself in the mirror. So yes, you're in good company.
Totally get it. Totally. Listen, I took a year off of work. Some days I didn't get out of my pajamas. And can I just say, this poem will be written and I'm going to dedicate it to y'all. Breastfeeding was one of the hardest things I ever did in my life. And, you know, I don't appreciate it because in the movies, it's all very pretty and the boob just comes out and the baby's drinking and there's a pretty blanket and you're glowing. And that was not my experience. You understand? That was just not my experience. So, wow. And I don't think we're honest enough about that. Because we don't want to be, oh, what do you mean? Is there something wrong with your maternal instincts that your baby was not able to latch the moment that you brought it home? We don't. And if we talk about it, we talk to each other in our mom groups, whatever. But we, you know, we need to exalt the process.
Exactly.
Yeah, that was the first lesson my son taught me it was a hard lesson because I realized like my whole fantasy about being my mom was that breastfeeding thing.
Yes.
So cool. I can't wait. And I'm going to tell you, they put Zan on me in the hospital and he did this. And he never took to it after that. I mean, and that was the first night in the hospital. I remember thinking, I think I got it. I think something's happening here. And it was, I'm like, that was the first time in my head it ever sunk in that I'm like, there are actually things that I actually can't figure out how to be in control of. It was a great lesson to get. Yeah. But man, that was.
Yeah.
Didn't happen.
So Elizabeth, thank you for coming. 5 minutes.
Oh, yes.
Whatever. Thank you for being here. We appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. I actually stopped breastfeeding. I breastfed my 2-year-old much longer than I normally would because of the pandemic. And I was doing the math and I'm like, I've been pregnant or breastfeeding for like the last 8 years.
Oh, wow.
Like that was crazy. Yes.
Wow.
So like I said that out loud the other day to myself. I was like, oh my gosh, like that's insane. Like
It is. I had one and I'm like, oh Lord, good. My hat is
my
off to
son
you.
is not, let me wait,
My hat
let me
is off
clarify
to you.
that. My son is not 8. I was not breastfeeding an 8-year-old. I have
Oh,
multiple
no,
children.
I know, I figured.
Yeah, we knew. We knew.
I figured.
Okay, cool.
You're good.
I love that we got into this discussion though. And I think that speaks volumes about the energy that you bring, Caridad, that says we can speak honestly in this moment.
Absolutely.
That's really you. That's you.
Thank
And that's
you.
lovely.
I
That's
appreciate
lovely.
that. That is the mission, authenticity, and
Yeah.
It
what
shows.
you see is what you get.
Yeah, it shows. I mean, it does. So I want to ask you to read one more poem before we end, if that's okay.
Absolutely. I would love
I
to.
would love that.
So I will read actually I love to read this poem. It's one of my favorite poems just because it is modeled after another poetic mentor of mine, Anne Sexton, and her poem From My Lover Returning to His Wife. So this is from my lover returning to her husband. And I just need to find it. Okay, here we go.
Awesome.
For my lover returning to her husband after Anne Sexton. He is all there. Disney promises, fairy tales, a cameo carved out of soap. He has always been there, buff and bench pressed, primped, posed, safe under glass. I was an indulgence, cashmere draped across your thighs, brownie binge after years of salad, sweet clean peaches in February. His piece fits your puzzle, a perfect match. You see to the girls, the dog, the job, the mop. He writes checks that buy the best, orders the chaos you call your life, marked by a Swiss watch that minds minutes, but not children. He's seated, round and female, your body filled with life he put there, cocky as God. I give you back. I give you permission for the lava inside him spewing on your thighs, for the coward in him, the drinker, the liar, the teller of secrets who wanted to watch, for the pale scar on his nose, for the prize that is his face, for his strong man's arms and 7 white shirts, for the vasectomy, for the caretaker in you who will consider compromise when he burrows beneath you and tugs on the brown ribbons of your hair to tie you up, tie you to him captive. He is comfortable, result of your childhood. Climb him like Everest. He is solid. As for me, I am makeup. I wash off.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank you.
Wow.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, a lot of us were going for the brownie binge after years of salad.
Oh.
So well said. And brown ribbons of your hair. And Elizabeth
Oh my
just
God.
wrote, wow. Yes.
Thank you.
Wow.
Perfect to end on.
Wow.
Thank you so very much for celebrating with us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really been great. And I feel like we were in person and that's such a gift for me. Thank you for your willingness to have me and your openness and your reception of me. My heart is quite full. Thank you, lady.
Oh, good. And I want to remind everybody, you can buy the book directly from Caridad, and Venmo is in here if you need to go back up. It's $22 to get it mailed to you. And it's just Caridad Moro _ Moro at Venmo. Be well, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank
for
you
coming
so
and
much,
joining us on
everyone.
Thursday.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night, everybody. Thanks.